We are back with the Autopen scandal. Joe Biden's in hot water. He hired his own lawyer and everything. Welcome to Doug in Exile. This is where the happy patriots are. Look, I'm wearing my Eagle in Exile t-shirt. In your faith, if you want to order one for yourself from my buddy Amit Zappa's store, is down in the description. Let's get right to it, though. This is Biden in serious. The escalation of hot waterness that he is roasting in is getting pretty bad, guys.
The New York Times is reporting that former President Biden told them that he had orally granted all the pardons and commutations issued at the end of his term, meaning he did not personally sign the official warrants for clemency. Biden told the Times that he did, in fact, make every single one of the clemency decisions himself, but says that the Autopen was used to sign the warrants since there were a lot of them. Now, according to the Times, Biden called Trump and Republicans liars for saying he was incapacitated and his aides used the Autopen without his authorization. Alicia, I see you're shaking your head. Your response to this.
Okay, here we go with Julie Kelly on Twitter. Excerpts from the transcript are even worse than the New York Times article. One has to wonder how much the Times had to clean up the Biden-esque gobbledygook. That is, his own reports from his own office. The New York Times was doing something very similar with CBS and Kamala Harris. They cleaned up his statements to make them sound like they were actually spoken in English. I told them I wanted to make sure he had a pardon because I knew exactly what Trump would do without any merit, I might add. And you know, members of the January 6th committee, it's just there were no, I was deeply involved. I laid out a strategy, how I want to go about these dealings with pardons and commutations. And I pulled the team in to say, this is how I want to get it done, generically and then specifically. And so, you know, that's just how it worked. That's Biden giving orders. There's no way someone could decipher that gobbledygook.
I have so many responses to this because we're supposed to believe this at this point. It's really hard to swallow that statement there, that he said that he made the decision on, quote, every single one, when we know from so much reporting that there was a limit to his time where people had access to him. So there were decisions that were made, quote unquote, after hours. We know that for a fact. And so to say that it was every single one, I'm going to have to see the receipts on this one.
Okay, now here's Brianna Morella, because this is going to go into who actually pulled the trigger on that Autopen scandal. Autopen was used to free a Chinese, quote unquote, student that pleaded guilty to having 47,000 adult images in his possession. They also freed other Chinese spies. Who approved their clemency, and how much did the Communist Party pay them, one must wonder. Here's the effective grant of clemency document. And then over here is the Joseph R. Biden Autopen signature down below. We have no reason to think that this was Joe Biden's signature, by the way. Anyone could have released these Chinese communist spies as students.
You're both onto something American people need to pay attention. Time, math. How many commutations and pardons in one day? How many hours would it take for him to do this individually? It strains incredulity. Remember Hillary Clinton said willing suspension of disbelief? Just do the math on what it would take for him to do that individually when he couldn't cognitively get through more than a few hours a day of work.
Here's Julie Kelly. Mr. Biden himself has hired a new personal lawyer, Amy Jeffries says. So this is about Joe Biden is lawyering up. I'm just going to get to this headline here. This is his new personal lawyer, Amy Jeffries of Hecker Fink. Jeffries is married to D.C. District Court Judge Chris Cooper. These are people that all want to go over Trump's head with their legal opinions from lower courts. He is presiding over a few lawsuits against the president. So this is the lawyer that Biden is getting to help him get away with the Autopen situation. So they'll just go, hey, talk to my lawyer.
It's very lawyer-like and Clinton-like. I orally did this. This is why, watch very carefully, because I've seen this play from the Clintons, from others. They come out and they make a very clear lawyer, but somewhat ambiguous ambiguous statement that you really can't challenge and prove.
Here's more on the Autopen scandal. Breaking: Biden's pardons of the January 6th committee were signed by Autopen at the direction of an assistant. Here's Melonhead Adam Schiff, Jamie Raskin. Who else is? Oh, there's Liz Cheney. Here's the guy that cried a lot right here. At the January 19th meeting, which took place in the Yellow Oval Room at the White House residence, Mr. Biden kept his aides until nearly 10 p.m. to talk through such decisions, according to people familiar with the matter. The email showed that an aide to Mr. Siskel sent a draft summary of Mr. Biden's decisions at that meeting to an assistant to Mr. Zients, copying Mr. Siskel at 10:03 p.m. The assistant forwarded it to Mr. Reed and Mr. Zients, asking for their approval, and then sent a final version to Ms. Feldman, copying many meeting participants and aides at 10:28 p.m. So there's no way they could have gone over it with Biden in that amount of time. These people are working on their own, independently, using the Autopen. 3 minutes later, Mr. Zients hit reply all and wrote, quote, "I approve the use of the Autopen for the execution of all the following pardons." So it didn't go through Biden. This went through Mr. Zients. Guilty. We're going to reverse all these pardons, guys. Those are not presidential orders.
Griff, does this signal to you that someone's a little bit worried about these investigations that are taking place on Capitol Hill?
You bet. What is the motivation?
By someone, I mean Biden.
And by the way, here, this is the sort of stuff I'm talking about. That out in Colorado Springs, it was all on full display, Lisa. But now I can understand and appreciate, particularly if Dr. Jill Biden or others that are close to the former president are worried about his legacy being tarnished. But at the same time, there is no motivation to speak directly to the New York Times about this matter when your former aides are going up under oath on Capitol Hill.
And then here's Libs of TikTok. New York Times: Biden didn't individually approve each name for the categorical pardons list. His staff ran the final version through the Autopen. Mr. Biden did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons that applied to large numbers of people. He and aides confirmed, rather, after extensive discussion of different possible criteria, he signed off on the standards he wanted to be used to determine which convicts would qualify for a reduction in sentence. So he never went through an individual name. He said, these are the kinds of crimes that they performed that I want you to pardon. Even after Mr. Biden made that decision, one former aide said the Bureau of Prisons kept providing additional information about specific inmates, resulting in small changes to the list. Rather than ask Mr. Biden to keep signing revised versions, his staff waited and then ran the final version through the Autopen, which they saw as routine procedure, and aides said, once again, that is a complete indictment of what happened. Biden didn't look at the 1,500 pardons. And of course, the jailers were probably sending information going, these guys are hardened criminals. They didn't run it by Biden. They just ran the final list and said, we approve. Okay, here's Scott Jennings. Ooh boy, quote, Mr. Biden did not individually approve each name for the categorical pardons that applied to large numbers of people. He and aides confirmed. This is a huge scandal, one of the biggest scandals, because it's one thing to say that Biden wasn't cogent as president, that he wasn't present as president. That's one problem in and of itself. But really, the downstream problem from that is who was running the country and by what authority were they making decisions. You have lower aides and all these people that we did not vote for president. The president's allowed to appoint his aides, but it doesn't mean that they have the authority to make presidential decisions on his behalf. Do you see that? That's the whole conclusion of this whole thing is that Biden has a right to his appointees, to his staffers, and to his aides and lawyers. They do not have the right to act as president. And that's what they tried to do when they realized his decline was so great. He wasn't mentally there, or they thought he wouldn't mentally be aware enough to know if they did a runaround of him. So this is going to be a constitutional question. Does Biden have the right to grant authority even to aides and say, I gave them the authority to run the Autopen on their own? I offloaded that presidential decision. It would be no different than if Trump had some kind of a, executive order and it is said, you know what? I turn over all of my executive executive orders to Kash Patel. Kash Patel can now write executive orders without consulting me and sign for them using the Autopen, and they stick constitutionally as if I did them. That's obviously not what the Autopen is for. That's obviously not a constitutional power enumerated by the president. He does not have the ability to offload his job to someone else. So this is a scandal. This is, and didn't just happen once. I mean, you're talking about committing the sentences of 1,500 inmates, some of them on death row, where Biden released, and we have no idea if he had anything to do with it or if it was just some aide. I mean, some of these aides might have just gotten out of law school and gotten a job and been running Autopen. So that's the scandal. Look for this thing to unfold. We will keep following it all the way through. Give us a comment below if you think anything's going to happen to Biden. Does this get bigger or does this go away? I'm Doug in Exile.